Welcome back to part two of a radiator removal for a medium duty Cummins and Freightliner M2. All right, we're back on the bottom of the radiator. We're going to start removing the oil cooler lines. We still have a radiator hose right here and then two bolts. Like I said, there's a million different ways to do a job. Some people like to use a torch for removing these or extra heat for removing these, but I always prefer a quick zip with a cutoff tool versus fire out in the open because you never know what you're going to accidentally catch on fire. And safety first. I know you can throttle a side cut tool like this uh, really easier than you can handle a torch rolling around or even a hand torch catching stuff on fire. So grind it down most of the way. Um, you don't even have to get to the rubber on these. Just grind it like thinner, like paper thin, and then you can just break it off the rest of the way with a pocket screwdriver, or in my case, a larger pick tool. So I'm just breaking it off in a few quick little snaps. There we go. So then we break the seal off from where it was shrunk against the rubber. Just get rid of that guy. Now there's always extra coolant in here that you didn't get with the drain plug. The drain plug goes in at an upward diagonal angle, so it's a little higher than the bottom of the radiator itself. So I need to get the rest of this fluid out, or it's just going to be dripping all over my arm the whole time I'm doing it. So I set the pick tool in the bottom and I use it as a guide straight to the oil pan. So as you can see, the coolant is just running down my pick tool. All right, so we're going to remove these oil cooler lines out of the bottom of the radiator. The oil cooler is integral to these radiators. Check your radiator before you start this. Open the box and look and see if it comes with new ones already installed in the radiator. That way you won't have to be as careful to not lose the E-clips that come out of the deal. And on the opposite side, there's a clamp up against the radiator holding the right side uh, oil line from vibration and such. And then we also have to remove the left side. Here I tried to use my big pick tool to get those clips out, but the tip is just too dull to get in there. So whatever you have available, I think I ended up just grabbing my pocket screwdriver out of my pocket. It just uses some rather large E-clips. There we go. So you pop the little plastic piece out of the way, which is a secondary retainer, just for whatever reason to keep those E-clips from coming out. Be careful because those things can be really brittle from all that heat. So there's a little E-clip that comes out. Same thing on this side. Pop the little plastic piece out of the way. And then another E-clip. It can be really hard to tell the orientation of these things, but once you get the pocket screwdriver in there, you can kind of start to tell how it was oriented and which way to go to get it out of there. There we go. Now to get these things loose, it's basically there's a O-ring seal inside the female part of these, and after they sit for a while, you just get some rust, corrosion, and just they conform to each other. So you've got to apply some outward pressure on these lines, not too much, while you wiggle them, turn them. You can spray these with penetrating oil to help loosen it up, but I've never had one that I've had to fight so long and so hard that I really needed penetrating oil to help. Eventually, it will start itself out, and then you can pry it through the rest of the way out. Try to catch as much oil as possible. Um, 9 times out of 10, when you go to check the transmission fluid after your job is done, you won't need to add any because you're only just going to lose a little bit if you plug it off. Here we go. See, I'm using my pick tool to put some pressure behind the hose. We don't have a lot of slack on this side, so this side's a lot more complicated to get out. It might be easier to remove this once the radiator is supported by a hoist on the top, and you can move the radiator, push it out farther away. But in this case, I was able to get it loose and capped off. without having to loosen those two bottom bolts on the radiator. So we're removing the clamp down here, 1/2 inch nut and socket, or nut and wrench, but I actually could have done this with just the ratchet itself. It was actually spun off real easy. It's not a lock nut or anything. Alright, so now I'm going to get some pressure on this thing, some force, and really get a cap on it. Those lines, if you lose too much out of the lines, you will have to top off your training fluid, so it doesn't hurt to have some around and handy, but always try to save as much as possible. Plus, you don't want it just dripping all day. Like, for example, if you get the radiator out, then you get pulled off and have to go to another job, or even quite happens, it often happens they send the wrong radiator, and then you're stuck with this job just sitting here for days. You don't want it just dripping for days. So then I stick rags in the radiator side in the female, just to prevent it from leaking all over the place when I pull it out. I think I forgot to put a rag in the other side, but luckily I didn't make a big mess. The radiator, when it gets pulled, actually leans forward towards the hood at the top, and that's the way I chain it up on purpose, to make it easier coming out. So those things aren't going to leak all over the place anyway. I just try to get a rag in there just in case. All right, try to get, I kind of made a knot with a bolt in the middle so that the hoist doesn't slide side to side. Just a medium duty chain for this kind of thing. You don't need a super heavy chain that you would be using to remove a rear end pig or anything like that. Make sure the chain is inspected every time for breaks or any welds or damage, welds coming loose or damage or anything. So I hook the center section and try to put it evenly across, and I try to put it kind of tight here. I want the chain to stay towards the rear of the radiator, at the shoulders of the radiator, and that will help pull the whole thing up at an angle, and that will allow the shroud to naturally want to clear the engine fan without having to remove that bottom shroud or the engine fan. Luckily on this radiator you can do it that way. Many you do have to remove the bottom shroud, or at least loosen it so you can wiggle. Okay, so I took off the two bolts at the bottom, 15/16 nuts. The bolts themselves are set up into a bracket that runs across, and they're welded in so the bolts won't spin. Just have to take the two nuts off the bottom, break the radiator loose, and kind of just watch it, take it in a couple stages up. You might have to drop it back down because you've got it wedged against the hood or something to that nature. So anyway, I take it up a little bit, make sure I'm going to be clearing the shroud. Then I reach underneath with a pry bar, you can't see in the picture here, and I pop that bottom radiator hose off. And this is why I wait to remove that hose, because you can see the radiator is free now and it has more forward movement. The bottom radiator hose is held on by a clamp on the engine side, which isn't the easiest clamp to get to. And even if you take that clamp off, you're still on a hard pipe, so you don't have the most ideal movement. So no need to mess with that clamp. Just pull it up a little bit, then you can pop that whole hose off with a pry bar. And the same way going back together, you want to make it your first step when you put the radiator in to pop that hose on, and it will also help you guide you back into the bolts into the place you need to be once the hose is popped back on. But if you wait to do it till afterwards, after you already have it bolted in place, you just struggle. So this is another reason why I pull that chain all the way up pretty tight, because you can use the hoist to keep the radiator from spinning around on you. And also, you see I grabbed the slack of chain. I like to keep some slack so you can have one hand on the actual radiator and make sure it's all lined up good. So just jack it up high enough to clear the frame on that side. There you go. And you'll see I also have to clear the hood. So sometimes you have to spin it around a little bit, guide it out. Anytime when you have something up on a hoist, you don't want it swinging around violently or anything like that. You want to try to keep control of the object because it can cause a tip over. There we go. We pull it out till it's completely clear of everything. Drop it down to the ground. And just drop it kind of far enough to where it just touches. We still have to remove everything else off of the radiator. So we have the rest of the shroud bolts, the 3/8 head bolts. There's just two on the bottom that they're kind of squeezed up in the frame rail of the truck when it's mounted, really difficult to get to. So now I give a little bit of slack back on the bottom. 4 bolts per side to hold the bottom rail on. And right inside there, as you can kind of see the silver two parts right at the center. That's where the bracket is that has the bolts, the heads of the bolts welded together. But that piece is free floating in that bracket, so you don't want to lose um, that assembly down inside of there, because it is just sitting loose inside that bottom rail. 4 more bolts on that side. And she is loose. Sometimes you have to use a pry bar to get this thing off. It might be kind of tight. In my case, it fell off nicely. All right, we're coming to the end of the video. So just real quick, I like to remove and reinstall the charge air cooler with it off the truck. It's just, I've done it both ways inside while the radiator is still mounted, but it's just awkward. And some charge air coolers will hit the bumper or the hood in such a way that you could damage it removing it. So I like to do it on the outside. The top has the air diverter, has these little clips with locking centers. Pull the locking center out, then pull the clip out. Now, sometimes you can't reuse these. Sometimes you have to use bolts in the front. And the Radiator comes with new spring clips in case you have to switch over to 10mm head bolts uh, to replace this style. And these often just break coming out anyway. So you have to put 2 spring clips on the back side of the radiator for holding the top shroud inside the center of the top shroud, and then a couple spring clips on the front to replace those push pins with bolts. Now here I'd like to support the radiator with a soft foam material. I save packing material, but you can usually just use the packing material it comes with. All right, so it takes 2 push pins each corner with sliding little stainless steel clips, and you often need to put washers underneath the clips themselves because they can just make a hell of a racket. They can sit there and spin all day when the truck is running, vibrating. Sometimes brand new trucks, the drivers will come in and say there's a heck of a noise up front, and all it is those little stainless steel clamps vibrating around. So this kit luckily came with extra long pins that were unneeded, and it came with all those spring clips. It did not come with the vibration dampeners on the side of the radiators. These are actually very important. It just looks like a piece of foam stuck to the side, but there is no rubber between this radiator and its mounts on the truck. So vibration will eventually kill all this plastic. So they put these vibration absorbers on the side. I had to reuse the old ones, and all this is recycled rubber with adhesive on one side. So I was real careful to take it all apart, um, saving some of the adhesive to make installing it back on the new radiator a little better. Sometimes they come with 4 different pieces you have to put on yourself. Most of the time they come already installed on the new radiator core. All right. So kind of just temporarily stick them back in place while I put this on. The side pieces are kind of expanded a little bit. You see how easy that went on. So the iron, the steel itself is expanded on those. There's a close-up of the push pin and the locking stainless slider. So these things are expanded. So you're going to need some C-clips or fancy vice grips like I have to squeeze these ears back down to be able to put the slider in there. And sometimes you just kind of struggle with these to line them up and to put the right amount of washers in. Sometimes you'll put it in, put the slider in real nice. Then when you remove the C-clamps, you'll see it's loose and going to spin, and you need to put washers behind it. Yep, you can see here, mine dropped out and it no longer aligned, so I had to loosen it and do it again. The other 3 sides obviously went much quicker. All right, so once you get it in, get it squeezed together, get your slides in there. And in this case, I had to tap them, but all the other sides, they all went together just perfectly. I didn't need to use any pressure to put the clips on, just finger pressure slid it right in place. So that's the ideal situation. Line up the other side rail. Here should be a little close-up of a slider system. Sometimes you gotta use it, line it up, use it on one, then reposition the C clamps for the next one. Just whatever it takes to get these little slider pins put in. And you can see the C clamps are right in the way. So move them out of the way a little bit. Good. Did not need to re-clamp it. It was already good from the first pin. Nice and snug. All right, I like to do this off the truck so that I don't damage it. Just those two giant vibration dampener rubbers on the bottom. You can see there's kind of a fork setup where the bottom slides on and the front bolts back on. All right, this radiator had weird little plastic pieces on top that I had to kind of drill out in order to put the the speed nuts it came with. You'll see me put the speed nuts on in a second. In order to put those on, I had to drill out little pieces of plastic inside the top. So you never know what kind of a deal they're going to come with. All right, that's the end of the video. Appreciate you watching. Any further questions, let me know. But you pretty much just reverse these steps to put everything back together. If you feel like subscribing, well, I'll accept it. I try to keep these videos free and helpful as possible. So enjoy your day and get back to whatever it is you are doing, which could very well be your very own radiator job, or maybe just using the video to decide whether or not to do your own. But this is an easy job. No special tools needed if you do it this way. So take care and have a great whatever it is you like to have.